Good afternoon and welcome to the Restart webinar and podcast series brought to you by Arabian Business and the Prestige Group. Now, I'm Scott Armstrong and I'm the editor-in-chief of Arabian Business. And today we're tackling a very important topic, which is powering the future, how sustainability and reaching net zero can reshape the region. Now, we're talking about climate change, we're talking about energy, we're talking about renewable energy. I mean, it's possibly one of the most important conversations in the world right now. And also, we're not talking about coronavirus. If that doesn't keep you interested, I don't know what will. It's a very important topic. It's a very big topic. Thankfully, I'm joined by three very smart people to explore this conversation today. Today, my guests are a serial tech entrepreneur and sustainability advocate, Karl Feilder, who is the founder and CEO and chairman of Neutral Fuels, which is, we'll talk about that a little bit more. And he's also the lead singer of a band called Sandstorm, which interests me greatly. Also joining me today is Rhea, Singhal, who is the founder and CEO of Ecoware, India's largest sustainable food packaging company, and Rory McCarthy, who is Chief Commercial Officer and partner at Yellow Door, a company with over 110 megawatts of solar projects in the Middle East and South Asia. To you all, welcome to the podcast and webinar.
Hi, Scott.
Hello, Scott. Nice to be here.
First thing I'd like to do, and I'm going to start with Karl as the rock star. I'd like you just all to give our audience a little bit more of an overview of what you guys are up to with your various ventures. So, Karl, tell us a little bit more about Neutral Fuels.
So we're building the world's first billion-dollar biofuel business. We take local waste in cities around the region, and in local factories, we convert it into fuel that is used locally to power buses, trucks, school buses, in fact, generators, anything you like. We make a clean, green replacement for biodiesel.
Great. Rhea, yourself, let's talk about Ecoware.
So Ecoware, we are India's first and largest sustainable packaging company. We take local agricultural waste, so typically wheat, rice, and sugarcane, which has historically been used as animal fodder or is burnt out in the open, causing severe air pollution. And we convert it into packaging that's 100% biodegradable and compostable for the food and beverage industry, for the medical industry, thereby creating a closed-loop solution that displaces single-use plastic.
Okay, and Rory, finally, tell us about Yellow Door Energy.
Hello, my name is Rory McCarthy. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer and partner in Yellow Door. And what we do is we bring to business the ability to save money without expense or capital involved, reduce energy costs, reduce carbon footprint, control companies' overheads, and hopefully help companies start their sustainable journey.
Okay. Now, before we get into the big discussion, I'd also like to say to the audience who are tuning in, if you've got comments or questions for the panel, please post them in the comments section. And if there's time, we'll pose them to the panelists. So first question, basically, I'm going to ask you for a helicopter view of where we are. We're just coming off the back of Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. So sustainability is on the agenda. But where do you think as a region we're at? And again, Karl, I'm going to go to you first.
Well, I mean, it's a global problem. We call it climate change, and it's saving the planet that we're all trying to do. But we've got to look at this from a real helicopter view. In 1992, the world governments committed to reduce carbon footprint, to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of the world. And we sit here today in 2021, and we've got 60% increase in the carbon emissions. I don't think whatever strategy we've been following since 1992 has actually worked. I think everybody wants to pat themselves on the back that we've done quite well, but to be perfectly honest, we are heading in exactly the wrong direction. We've had the forecast from the UNFCCC that we have to stop our carbon emissions, otherwise we're going to get to a tipping point, and at the moment we are accelerating towards that tipping point.
Rhea, your perspective on that. Stark picture from Karl there.
So I have to say, I agree with Karl. I mean, okay, let's backtrack a little bit. The definition of sustainability, right? Very simply to me is intergenerational well-being. It's, meeting our own needs currently without harming future generations. And yes, what we see in the region is there's a lot of commitment, there are strategies. But like Karl said, I feel that sustainability needs to be at the core of these strategies, and action plans need to stem out of them as opposed to the other way around. So we've certainly got to change our ways, and quickly.
And Rory, your helicopter view as well.
I think both of my colleagues, both Rhea and Karl, have summed things up fairly well. We've got certainly a very, very long way to go. On a positive note, I would say that what has shifted is government policy over the last since 1992, the last 20, 30 years has been considerable. Regulation has changed. Governments have created policies that enable independent and enhance independent energy generation, enhance energy saving techniques. There's a very big focus on education. So I think that's a big positive. But I think that we really have to be very tenacious and get on board with it very quickly. The world demand for energy keeps growing. It's a hungry monster. The more we want 5G, the more we have to use desalination, the more the population increase, the harder and harder those sustainability objectives are going to be. And we've got a very aggressive sustainable energy goal here in the UAE, where I believe the government has been very forward thinking. 50% clean energy by 2050. It's ambitious. We've got a lot of work to do.
I'll come back to that in a moment there. I was speaking recently to Blair Shepherd, who is the global head of strategy for PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, and he's written a book called 10 Years to Midnight, and he cites climate change as one of the two massive and fast problems that we as a world need to fix. Otherwise, in 10 years, we're facing Armageddon. How much do you actually agree with that as a stark picture? Karl, you started the conversation.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be negative, and I'm generally a positive, bubbly, glass half full sort of a person. But when you review where we are at the moment, and we've spent a year focused on something other than sustainability, necessarily because people have been getting sick. But when you look at the impact that we've had from let's not mention coronavirus, but the impact that we've had on that is absolutely tiny compared with the impact that climate change is having. Right. We've had a few million people die from climate change related issues, and yet every year millions of people die through air pollution. We have to address the issues surrounding greenhouse gas emissions, and we have to do it very quickly. So will we get to Armageddon in 10 years' time? I don't think so, but I do think that we need to start behaving as if that's the situation so that we get some urgency. I've been doing this now for 13 or 14 years. And when we started this, I said, you know what, we need to dramatically reduce air travel. And everybody said to me, that's impossible. The world will never accept it. The businesses will never accept it. Well, we found out a way of reducing air travel dramatically. So let's look at the other things that were never going to be possible.
Rhea, to build on that, what are the sustainable things you think we can be doing right now?
So I think, what we've seen is, as businesses, I think just, embracing circular economy, right? Moving away from this make, dispose sort of model to reusing, zero waste, zero emissions, and just becoming more conscientious about what we're putting out there. And I think that, like Karl said, is that I think he hit the nail on the head. We need urgency. I mean, the planet is on fire and we need to do something quick. And people need to start seeing sustainability as an opportunity. I mean, across all stakeholder types. So whether we are looking at sustainable innovation, whether we are looking at technology, whether we are looking at just renewable energy, I think that sustainability needs to be at the core of whatever we're thinking of doing, basically.
So I think this is the perfect place to bring you in here, because you were the person that sounded a note of optimism there. But I also think that's really interesting what Rhea was saying there, is sustainability is an opportunity. Is there are we doing a bad job of selling the benefit of doing the right thing? There is a business opportunity here to be had. People can still make money. People still can go about running businesses and be sustainable at the same time.
I do think there is a lot that is being done to change things, and I think if you look at some of the technology that's being used here at the moment is being tested. Technology that can actually remove carbon emissions from the atmosphere, known as negative emissions technology is one example. But I think if you look at it on a day-to-day basis, what can businesses do? What can governments do? Well, the first enemy of, if you just say, climate financing initiatives, right? So you can be sourcing power, you can be sourcing water, but are you sourcing that in a clean way? Is your business a renewable business? Is it really a sustainable business? And what does that actually mean? Because that's what we as individuals can make choices on, and that's what companies can make choices on. And that can really make a very, very big difference if you start thinking about, okay, the energy I source, does it come from burning oil or burning gas, or does it come from solar? Does it come from wind? How am I making a choice with that? And then it comes to, educating at a micro level companies with employees. Well, what are the choices that I make every day in terms of sustainability choices, from disposing of material to waste to energy heat conversion to looking at carbon footprints, to publicizing the fact that what that organization actually thinks about in terms of its sustainability policy. And if you have 1,000 companies all generating maybe their own energy, or reducing their waste, or recycling their water, all those things will make a tangible difference. And if you multiply that by country around the world and you get that kind of buy-in, there really can be positive shift.
I mean, Karl, you're obviously working in biofuel. What is the business benefit? Is it good business to do the right thing?
It is. We have to, first of all, recognize that essentially the challenge we face is a business problem. It's businesses and their decisions that created the products and services that have actually generated the greenhouse gas emissions. It's not predominantly governments that have actually created the emissions, it's companies. So we have to look at this strategy problem from a company perspective, and most companies are focused on making profits. So going and telling them that you need to do green things and letting them assume that that means that they're going to make less profit is a bad strategy. So what we've been doing, certainly for the last 13 years, is to show businesses that if they make the right choices, they'll actually improve profitability and do the green thing and do the better thing at the same time. And that really is a compelling argument for so many businesses, that they want to do green things, but if we come at them with a financial argument first and then back it up with a very green solution, then it's a lot easier. That's through normal decision making. You can take that to the board, you can show a return on investment, and the board can just say, oh yes, we want to do that. Oh, by the way, it's green.
Rhea, are you seeing that too with Ecoware? I mean, what kind of impact has your operation had on the business climate, particularly in India? Have you seen that shift?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when we started 11 years ago, none of our stakeholders understood what biodegradable, what compostable, any of it meant. No one understood what it is, what we were trying to do. And mind you, India, we started Ecoware much before sort of any Clean India campaign. There was very little awareness. There was very little policy as well behind it. But we built awareness. We've built, industry standard over the last 11 years. And we have seen now, we're seeing consumer behavior change. We're obviously really proud of the impact that we've created. I mean, 100% of our revenue is derived from a circular economy model. We've been recognized for our efforts on this. We've created social impact. We've created an industry that never existed before. We've created jobs. We've obviously, and even from an environmental perspective, last year, we displaced over 50 million pieces of single-use plastic. We've had a study done on us that shows for every dollar invested into Ecoware, there's a $2.50 return. So it's certainly, like, sustainability is an opportunity, and it is, you can be profitable and sustainable at the same time.
Now, Karl, we were talking before we came on, and I promised we wouldn't say coronavirus today, but actually you were making a good point that actually there's some lessons that we can learn from this pandemic that we can apply to the issue of climate change. I wonder if you could just unpack that a little bit more, because I found it fascinating.
Well, the fascinating thing for me is to draw the parallel between how the media grabbed hold of coronavirus and forced governments to very quickly make decisions, and how they've not grabbed hold of the challenge of climate change in the same way. and haven't put the same pressure on governments to make decisions. Essentially, coronavirus has a lot more immediacy about it, and that seems to be something that forces change. Whereas you've only got to look out the window on a winter's day here and then see the levels of air pollution that we've got to see that we're actually making a negative impact on our planet. That should be an immediate driver for everybody. So I think it's the fact that we need to get more urgency into the conversation. The United Nations said 2 years ago that we've got 10 years to change track. Well, we've now got 8 years to change track. That's not very long. And whilst people are trying to kick it into touch and say, well, I won't be running this business anymore by then, it's the next generation that has to worry about it. Actually, that's not stacking up as an argument anymore. It's actually business people that have to decide on their watch that they're going to do something about this. And they need to do it now.
I mean, we've got a group of some of the biggest investment vehicles, political leaders all over in Saudi Arabia right now meeting today at the Future Investment Initiative. And obviously climate change will be on their agenda. So maybe there'll be some headlines coming out of that. But Rory, in your opinion, why don't we care? Is it the media's fault? Has the media not focused on this because we just don't think it's going to drive clicks and views and sell newspapers? Does climate change or does renewable need a better PR agent?
Well, I think going back to what Karl mentioned, I think we're not using the word, the C word, but it certainly had a very, very good, strong PR agent. Everywhere you look, every media vehicle, every Instagram post, every news channel, every paper, it's been there. But I mean, you can do exactly the same thing with climate change, and it should be there. To be honest, what I see is the real enemy, building on what Karl's actually saying, as long as people don't actually realize the real cost of energy, and they're not paying for the real cost of energy because that is subsidized by the local government, then, you're not going to change. Government subsidies on an international level are the enemy of climate financing initiatives. Let me pick a country, for example. If you pick, say, the Sudan, it's a country that's nearly bankrupt, but it managed to find $3 billion last year to subsidize electricity costs, and it hasn't even got an infrastructure. So isn't that much better for people to pay the real cost of power and build an infrastructure, and then you can start getting power to people and educate people? I mean, there's many other things you can do with that money. And if business pays the real cost of energy, the real cost of water per cubic meter, per kilowatt hour, all of a sudden, a lot of these clean technologies come through, and business will dramatically reduce that carbon input. Karl, what you're talking about is when you look out to the sunset and you see that pollution in the sky, governments are partially responsible, but that's also driven and caused by businesses. There has to be a social cohesion between the private and the public sector and an ownership to drive that forward to reduce carbon emissions, and we can do it.
How?
Okay, I mean, let's start straight away with generation. I mean, one of the technologies you can do straight away is generation, be that through wind or be that through solar. Another way to do it is by starting to look, rather than using electricity that's created by burning oil, start looking at things like solar thermal to heat hot water. So in bottling plants, you can start using heat directly to run your manufacturing machine. Another way to do it again is in textile factories. Rather than just pouring thousands of meters of water down the drain into some poor river where a village is feeding and washing itself every day, put a treatment system in place, measure it, and make sure the government taxes it on what you actually dump into the system, and review it constantly. These are things that can be integrated easily and quickly. You can have businesses measuring the amount of power they actually take from the grid and actually measure the amount of clean power versus mixed use power. The way forward, we will never get away from oil completely as a race, because oil derivative products produce so much of what we use in our everyday life. But you can certainly limit that drastically enough to try and shift that balance forward by employing smart technologies. Let's take the Middle East, for example. If we take our shopping malls, they're shut between 11 p.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning, but we run the air conditioning, still maintaining a 70-degree Fahrenheit position. Do clothes on racks need to maintain a 70-degree position? Or can that temperature go up to 85, 90 degrees reducing the consumption of electricity, reducing the burn, reducing the carbon footprint. There's so many different ways we can attack this together.
Rhea, are you seeing any hope? I mean, Rory there is outlined just a few of the first steps that the business can take. Are you seeing any hope in there that people are beginning to listen to the conversation at all? The businesses are beginning to listen to the conversation and understand the issues here? And are you seeing this at a government level as well? I mean, I'm mindful of the fact that we have actually just had Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, so there is at least some service to this issue. What are you seeing in terms of there is actually a way forward here? It's not all, I hope isn't all lost.
I don't think hope's all lost. I think the issue is here how quickly we're acting. Like Karl said, we've got, we talked about 10 years, we're now at 8 years. There needs to be urgent action, and that's the concern. If you think that you can save yourself from climate change or it's not going to affect you, I don't believe that. I mean, we're seeing extreme weather patterns. It's going to affect your productivity, your manufacturing facility, eventually your outputs and your P&Ls. And I don't think that it's something that you can hide on. So I think, honestly, as a business, if you want to, you want to be present in the next 5 or 10 years, then you've got to have a sustainable growth plan. To answer your question, yes, I am seeing more and more businesses make sustainable choices, but I feel that those are more small and medium enterprises. They're not the larger organizations. And I think that, we need to see the larger companies basically make that shift. Because it will just bring about that incredible power of scale. When you can get a large organization to lead by example, where they drive change in their supply chain, the impact can be massive and can show you what's possible. We're certainly seeing more and more entrepreneurs come up, creating sustainable solutions, and their challenge is obviously scale. But what we could certainly see more of is the larger corporations, the larger organizations move quicker and actually make more time-sensitive commitments. It's not about I'm going to do this in the next 10 years. It's about I'm going to change the way of the organization in the next 5 years, but this is what it looks like in the next 18 months and 2 years, and these are my milestones to get to that 5. So we need, yes, consumers are changing, businesses are changing, but it's not quick enough.
Karl, is it our generation that's the problem? Is it as old fogies, as boomers and as Gen Xers that are the problem? Are the millennials and the Gen Zs, is that where the hope is?
Well, they already know that there's a problem and they know that it needs fixing really urgently. But many of them are not in any position of power to do anything about it. They can help a little bit by recycling at home and choosing LED lights and all that sort of stuff. But they can do the best by actually nagging their parents. And bear in mind, particularly in this region, that most of us are only here because we've got a job. So if we're here and we've got a job, the question to your employer is not, where is my recycling bin? The question is, when is this company going to be net zero? And of course, the United Nations pushed this idea in 2018 that we should be aiming for net zero. But before you can get to net zero, which is a number, you have to know, where am I today? And the biggest issue I've seen in the region for companies is that they simply don't know what today's carbon emissions are for their current levels of activity, whether that's emissions that they directly create, scope 1, electricity emissions, scope 2, or indirect third-party emissions that they cause, which is their scope 3 emissions. They simply aren't measuring that. And one of the things that the governments could do, all of the governments, is to force all businesses to report that, because you can't manage what you don't measure. And at the moment, we're being told to measure and set a target to zero, but companies just aren't measuring it.
Could you just for a moment, just for the audience tuning in, because there'll be different levels of knowledge out there, define what net zero means?
So net zero, to me, is really simple. That when you add up all of your carbon emissions from everything that your business does, whether that's sitting in the office, people driving to work every day, people flying around the world for unnecessary meetings, people actually helping your business to produce products, people talking on the phone and using electricity for that type of activity. When you add all that up, it comes to a number, and that is the carbon footprint of your organization. And that number needs to get to zero. That's what net zero means. And the net part of it is, if you can't reduce it by taking better, efficient decisions on electricity use, by not traveling halfway around the world to unnecessary meetings, by getting all your staff to drive electric cars, if you can't drive down emissions totally to zero, then you need to offset the remainder. And the best and quickest way of offsetting is to go into a tree planting program in a part of the world that's been deforested.
Would you agree with that definition, Rory?
Yes and no. I know obviously the situation in India is probably more so severe listening to Rhea, but Rhea, there are actually, quite a few examples of companies that we deal with that are taking that kind of initiative, and they are actually measuring carbon. Nestle, for example, is one of them that we work with very closely, and we've developed several plants with them. They're very, very strict on reducing their carbon, and eliminating whatever they can. And it's not just the international companies like the Nestle's of this world or the Unilevers, but also locally. Majid Al Futtaim is absolutely a leader in this facility in terms of employing technology both below the roof and what we call in Yellow Door above the roof, from generation and energy saving technology, from assisted cooling to lighting. And they've got a very, very serious drive to drive down that emissions to near zero. We have one project in Jordan where approximately 93% of their electricity across 12 stores will be clean energy. And I think that's quite a substantial positive feat in today's world. And that's off a plant that we've built in the middle of the desert, an unarable land, which we've used to generate energy and ship it clean across to 12 different supermarkets. So there are positive examples, guys, of where that change is actually happening. If it can scale, then we have a real chance of making this work.
Rhea, can it scale? Can it scale?
Yes, I think it can scale. I think, why not? I think you've got to, when I spoke about larger organizations, I was thinking of reinventing product, right? We look at a plastic footprint. We look at, one of the largest challenges in India and other Southeast Asian countries is that we have no waste management. Everything ends up in a landfill. Right? We have no waste management. We have no waste treatment. We don't even segregate waste at source, which is absolutely shocking. So I think that, yes, we're seeing from an energy perspective things change, but I'd love to see more sustainable innovation in creating new products that use less virgin material, for instance. But scale can definitely happen. I think what we're seeing is more and more government initiatives. And that's coming about at the moment. We're seeing a lot of investment in this space as well, and impact become important, and impact measurement become important for in the investment space as well.
Sorry, Karl, I'm going to come back to Rory just on this, because we were talking recently with Taka, and Taka they're talking about now they're just financial close on what will be, again, a second time Abu Dhabi's going for the biggest solar plant in the world. I know there's definitions, that sort of thing. So they were saying that as a private company without subsidy, they're being able to create solar energy at a very reasonable price that they can make a profit on. So are you seeing, particularly in the solar side of things, renewable energy beginning to scale, the prices come down significantly over the years, where it becomes a viable option for governments to consider as well as businesses?
Governments, yes, of course, if you look at the price of solar panels and also the efficiency of solar panels plus what you can actually generate. If you're looking 2-3 years ago, you were talking 300 watt panels. Now you're talking 570, 600 watt panels. Also, the efficiency that you get out of a solar panel has gone up now to 22, 23%. There's every indication that will move to 30% over the next couple of years. So you're seeing massive changes there. So for business, we can potentially go into a business and we can look at their carbon footprint, we can look at their energy spend, and we can actually reduce what they spend per annum by up to 30 to 40%. Now, if you're a company, and if you're an energy intensive company and you spend 15% of your overhead, which isn't uncommon, on energy, and all of a sudden you have an organization that can come in and say, you know what, we're going to reduce your carbon footprint, we're going to make a positive difference to your sustainability goals, and we're going to reduce that 15% to 10%, which means every unit that comes out of your factory is going to be that much cheaper. Why wouldn't they want to scale that?
Karl, I mean, Rory there makes absolute sense. If I'm running a business and I'm going to make a massive saving from pursuing the right way of doing it, but by pursuing sustainability, why aren't more businesses doing this? I mean, again, you say, you're moving into the biofuel, and I'm sure that the savings and cost savings and business imperatives there. Why is industry embracing this as just, good sense?
Well, I think in general, large organizations who are the predominant creators of the carbon footprint, large organizations are not really renowned for changing quickly. And indeed, they're not renowned for recruiting people that are hugely innovative. And I don't mean to be rude to them, but most innovators actually don't want to have a boss and want to have their own company and run their own show. So we have to somehow work out how to bridge the gap between the innovative technologies and the large organizations that need to adopt them. That's something that we've been trying to do for a long time. We've been very, very successful in getting very large organizations to adopt biofuels. But the thing I would point out, and I don't know how to make this and shout louder from the rooftops, 20% of the UAE's carbon footprint, and it's not uncommon around the world as well, about 20% of carbon emissions come from transportation. About half of those emissions come from non-passenger transportation, so that's trucks and school buses, and 75% of that comes from diesel engines. And there is no ready, quick replacement for a diesel engine, unfortunately. There are electric prototypes and there's a few on the roads, but when you look at the average age of a truck in India being 20 years, it's going to take a long time for us to phase out those diesel engines. So we have a quick, ready source of replacement fuel for diesel, which is the biofuel. India has firmly embraced biofuel. I'm proud to say that some of the other countries have embraced it too. And they've had to make government level decisions to allow us to recycle within our own countries, so that the Europeans who want to buy all of the feed material for the biofuels don't get to take everything out of the Middle East just because they can pay a higher price for it. So there are some fantastic challenges that we're all facing, but businesses simply need to have a strategy, and that strategy needs to be, we will be net zero by, and then pick a date. And as soon as they set that as a company strategy, they can start measuring. They can start managing their footprint, and they can start taking positive impacts that will improve their profitability.
Okay. I'm going to ask each of you to answer this and rate your answer in a scale of 1 to 10, purely from the perspective of climate change and not to do with politics. But how significant is it that Donald Trump has gone and Joe Biden is here? And I'll start with you, Rhea, because you've got a big smile on your face when I ask that question.
I would say 10.
And why?
Well, I mean, we all know why. It's pretty apparent. We were all there, but I think that there's, now with him gone, there's hope that the Biden administration will actually, commit to sustainability and economic growth that should go hand in hand.
Day one, Rory, he's rejoined the Paris Climate Accord. How significant is that? Is that significant?
I think that's a huge step, because the significant step. And also, I think America as well acknowledges that they have a massive problem in terms of need for spend in their infrastructure, from power stations to transport of electricity to roading to bridges to sewage treatment. So he needs to move away from traditional utilities and encourage more that sort of utility 3.0, where you have that mini providing utility, sort of providing to an industrial grid or dividing to an independent park. They desperately need to shift that in America, because otherwise they will need to invest trillions to turn around and to stay relevant and to compete. And if they do not have cost-effective energy, reasonably priced water, they will not be able to compete against China and other countries moving forward. So as much as he's doing it for all the right reasons, he's also doing it to make sure that economy is sustainable, I believe, as well. I'd give it a 6 out of 10.
You give it a what? A 6 out of 10?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was a 1 with Donald.
Oh, well, that's progress. Karl?
I think Rory's right. I mean, he's hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, for any business, you've got to have competitive products. And increasingly, your customers are asking that your products are more sustainable than your competition. And American products coming out of the States with a very, very fossil fuel intense economy are actually less sustainable than products coming out of other countries. And they've got to address that. So is it a big good piece of good news that President Biden is now in? Well, yes, I think it is. But you've got to look at the fact that the US has the largest carbon footprint per capita, and that they have to do something about that. And they need to be more competitive on the world stage. So I think it's a mixture of it's good for the planet and it's good for the American economy. On the other hand, they did vote for Donald Trump. You know, half of the country voted for him. And I'm not making a political statement, but if half the country voted for him, that's because half of them don't believe that climate change is real. And I think there's a massive amount of education that needs to be done in the States still. I remember being shouted off stage 12 years ago in a conference in Texas, saying that I was spouting heresy when I was talking about climate change. I think there is a massive challenge there of both education and bringing everybody up to speed. It's not a political point. You know, we're all one species. We've only got one planet. So we need to bring everybody to the point where they realize that this is for their own good. We have to be more sustainable. We have to address climate change.
You just stole my next question, which was about the Trump supporters, but you didn't answer the question on 1 to 10.
4.
4. Okay, right.
I think that as a result of both COVID and as a result of the Trump legacy, the US is less relevant on the international stage than it used to be. And their carbon footprint as a part of the world's carbon footprint is about 40%. So I would say that they are somewhere in the 4 out of 10 to get it sorted.
Rhea, what can the rest of the world learn from India? That's a big question.
That is an interesting question. So I think India's commitment to I would say to slow down climate change, be it protecting biodiversity, be it tackling single-use plastic, air pollution, whether we're looking at renewable energy. I think India has definitely, as a developing nation, is doing a great job. I think we're seeing commitment actually roll out in terms of action at the ground level, which I think is which is important for a change. It's not just all about creating strategy. I think though one of our key challenges is that we are 1.3 billion people, and education and awareness that is required to change behavior in a permanent way, is a challenge for us. It's about reaching out to absolutely everybody, to the masses, to make sure that everyone is behaving differently in a more positive way for themselves, their communities, and the planet. So I think education and awareness is something that we need to continue. We need to scale up, and I think that's something that we need to do more of. And we would love to see more policy as well. I think it would be really helpful that is enforced and that's consistent.
Rory, I want to ask you. I mean, but I will ask this question to all three of you actually, though, because I'm the journalist and I'm not the expert, and you're the expert. I'll start with you, Rory. But what's the question that I'm not asking that people need to know the answer to?
I think it's an awareness, and Rhea sort of touched on education. I think education is just as relevant a topic in any developed country as it is in an undeveloped country, because it always surprises me what people don't actually know. And I was talking to a couple of gentlemen from a very well-known consulting organization. I was actually really surprised what they didn't actually know. So I think the first is what support is available on existing and emerging technology that allows people to start being part of that energy transition. And at Yellow Door, we all believe in embodying, sort of be the change that you want to see in others to drive that. And we look at a government perspective. Government is first. It's got to have regulation and friendly policy around driving sustainability and around forcing a change in behavior. From a power perspective, that means, it doesn't matter if you've got policies that support self-consumption, net metering, or transportation of electricity, or disposal of waste, or treatment of water, but the removal of subsidies that bear the false cost of what electricity and water really is. Encourage people to change, remove those subsidies, make that happen. And then it's that education piece on products, like what other alternatives do we have? Well, can I generate clean energy? Can I reduce my air conditioning position? Can I encourage my staff to do things differently in terms of consumption of water, switching off the lights, desalination, batteries, thermal cooling? There are so many things that we can actually employ, and it's just making businesses and constantly educating that there are things that we can do, that we can employ to reduce expense, allow them to be more profitable, but make that sustainability position move, reduce that carbon footprint, take those cars off the road. We can make positive change.
Same question then to you, Karl. In 18 minutes or whenever we wrap up this webinar, the one question that you can't then go, do you know what, he never asked me that. What's that question?
I like Rory's answer, which was very sophisticated, but I must meet slightly less sophisticated people more often than Rory. As a journalist, I'd be asking...
Guilty as charged.
I'd be asking politicians, when is your country going to be net zero? And why is it not sooner than that? And to companies, I'd be saying to them, when is your company going to be net zero? And why is that not sooner than that? And if they don't understand the question, ask them why they don't understand the question. If they don't have a strategy, ask them why. Is it that they don't believe the United Nations? Is it because they found another planet to live on? I actually simplify the messages and simplify the questions. I don't want to get lost in debates about whether concentrated solar thermal is better than photovoltaic. I mean, that's great. I'm an engineer. I can cope with all those discussions. Most business leaders can't. They just need something simple. And net zero is the simplest strategy they can have. It's really difficult to implement, but it's really easy as a strategy.
And Rhea, what's the killer question I haven't asked you yet?
I think it's definitely both of what Rory and Karl have said. I think it's about being more challenging, being challenging as a consumer. I think challenge the businesses you buy from. It's about challenging. It's about challenging accountability across all stakeholders, right? Whether you are a consumer, a CEO, or you're a policy maker. It's about why aren't you doing this quicker ultimately? I think the most annoying thing that we've seen is these far-fetched goals about, okay, I'm going to do this, 10 years from now. And it's the person who even set that goal might not even be in that job and might not even have the right intent in place. So it is about the now, and it's about why aren't you doing this now? So that's the question.
Rory, you've been working with a number of businesses here, and I'm going to, again, Karl reminding me about coronavirus. If we look at the way that this region has dealt with the coronavirus crisis, in which we're in a region that has been able to take strong action early and perhaps hasn't been held back by the political theatre that Western leaders have to deal with. They can make a decision and they can pursue it with vigor and aggression to make sure that they deliver it. Can this region lead the way in sustainability, and how do they do that?
Yes, I think they can, and I think the government's actually made a number of initiatives here and really did lead the way initially as well. I think the Shams initiative that was employed by DEWA in 2015 that allowed private solar generation for business was the first position, where they allow DEWA to be potentially a battery. So, for example, if you have a 1 megawatt plant on your roof of your factory and you generate excess electricity that month, you can use a bidirectional meter into DEWA, and that appears as a credit on your statement the next month, which is a fantastic way of encouraging business to move into renewable energy and renewable resources. So I think definitely very much that policy that they have of 50% clean energy by 2050 is a very clear mandate. If they can enhance that, remove the subsidies that we have in the Gulf on the cost of energy, start bringing in more regulation, more drive on that, I think that'll really, really help. They've already put some great work in place. If they build on that, it will make a difference.
Karl, who's going to lead the way? Who's going to win the race to sustainability?
Well, I think I might have an inside read on this, to be perfectly honest. I actually think that the UAE has the vision and the commitment to do this. I think that I may be reading the tea leaves a little bit, but I sense that the UAE realizes that this is a competitive environment, and that it's something that with bold ambition and with courage and with sheer commitment and determination that we can actually do. And I'm very proud to live here and very proud to be part of the solution to the climate change challenge. But to be answering your question precisely, I think the UAE is going to show the region, if not the world, the way that you need to aggressively, courageously, and profitably challenge this climate change issue.
Can I throw a potential rival to that crown at you all and ask about Saudi Arabia, particularly with NEOM and some of the initiatives being announced by the Crown Prince there? He revealed the Line, I think, which is one of NEOM's cities, where it's all about commuters and traffic free and that sort of thing. How significant is that, do you think? And Rhea, it's your turn to talk. So,
look, I've grown up here. My parents moved here in 1983. I have literally seen this entire city, Dubai, the country, grow from absolutely nothing to what it is today. And I know that when the UAE is committed to something, they will deliver on it. And I've seen that over 35, 36 years. So I don't doubt the fact that they will show the region how it's done. In terms of Saudi Arabia, yes, the initiative has been announced, and I think that we're seeing things change there, but I don't think it's going to happen as aggressively as how things are done in the UAE, for sure.
Rory, your perspective? I mean, it's a different challenge, isn't it? Because they've got a population of 30 million, which they need to bring with them, as opposed to the UAE with that slightly, but perhaps more nimble and more agile, shall we say? What's your view of Saudi Arabia's importance in this conversation?
We're expanding into, we've already got a company registered in Bahrain. We're expanding into Saudi Arabia later this year. We see Saudi actually moving forward quite quickly. I think the cost of energy in Saudi is still relatively low. So in the industrial sector, it doesn't make sense. Unless that shifts, you won't get the industrial sector to move. But the commercial sector is still relatively large. And I think that those are customers, those are companies that you can attract quite quickly. And also you can start putting in place energy as a concern. Certainly the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia and the royal family seem to be getting behind solar energy initiatives. There is legislation in place. It hasn't been implemented, but there is legislation in place for net metering policy and for private energy generation to be able to encourage more renewable energy. So definitely, I think there is room in Saudi for that to change and for shift. Again, those subsidies, government subsidies, the sooner they come off, the more that will accelerate, the greater the speed that would accelerate.
Karl, a final thought on that subject for you?
Well, I think echoing what Rory was just saying, last year we opened the first biofuels facility ever in Bahrain and went into production there, which required a huge amount of forward thinking, but also gave us access across the causeway into Saudi Arabia. And that's allowed us to have a slightly better view of what's going on in Saudi. We also were able last year to ship the first biofuel ever into Saudi for testing at both the NEOM and the Red Sea project. And so we know the commitment is there, and we know the vision is there to do it. However, I'd actually like a bit of brotherly competition between Saudi and the UAE to see who could be the first net zero country. I mean, what a great aspiration for both of them to use all of their might to try and be the most net zero country in the world. I mean, brilliant.
You reminded me of the Browley brothers completing the triathlon, crossing the line together at this point, which wouldn't be a bad thing. Very briefly, because time is pressing on us now, will the Qatar issue help? I mean, we've seen the Alula Accord. We've now seen the borders come down. I mean, from a very pure sustainability point, the fact that Qatar Airways is not flying around airspaces now, it means less fuel maybe being burnt. So that's one thing. But having the GCC all cooperating again, how helpful is that going to be to this conversation moving forward? Rhea.
I think it's going to be very important. I think if you want to scale your impact and you want to see change, I think the more alignment and synergy you have, it's essential. You've got to get everyone to buy in to the region to be a success.
So simply put, Rory, agree?
I think Qatar is, and probably Qatar and Kuwait are a long way away from the advanced policy that's being integrated within, sort of Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So I think definitely those three countries are certainly leading. I think Qatar and Kuwait have a long way to go to change that. That would be what I'd say on that. Yeah.
I mean, Karl, I'll bring you in on it because obviously we've had Qatar talk about the sustainability of their stadiums. We're going to have the World Cup there next year. What's your perspective on that question?
Well, first of all, I don't follow football, so I shouldn't care what happens when it comes to the World Cup. But
they hold athletics there too, apparently.
Okay. What I would say is that it's good to see the GCC working together, although I don't see a harmonised policy towards sustainability at all. But if you come back to what I was saying earlier, that this is essentially a company problem and that large companies need to adopt innovative solutions, and those innovative solutions are going to come from small startup businesses, then I think the biggest game changer in the region is actually the recognition of Israel, which has a very, very innovative culture there. They're the second largest source of venture capital outside of Silicon Valley. They have some fantastically creative solutions. And having access to those technologies into the rest of the Middle Eastern region, I think could make a big difference.
I think I read somewhere that they've got one of the highest number of startups per capita. And one of the big benefits of this deal is that they don't have anywhere to scale that technology. So do you see that being the opportunity there with the UAE being able to scale some of those innovations?
I think not just to scale those innovations, but also to make our homegrown startups a lot more competitive. Because I think you've actually just raised the bar for startups. We're now not competing against the existing companies in the GCC. We're competing on a world stage with a world-class player coming out of the Israeli startup culture. So I think that this is something that's good for everybody. We all should be driven to be more efficient, to be better with what we're producing, to produce better products for our customers.
You've all been very patient with this old fossil rambling on for the last 55 minutes. Final question of the session to each of you. Karl, what's the one thing this year that is exciting you in sustainability?
Gosh, I think it's the introduction of the vaccine, to be quite honest, and I'm terribly sorry, but the sooner that we can start to get back to really seriously putting sustainability on the top of the agenda, then the sooner that we're going to get our heads around climate change. And the only thing that's going to get us to be able to restart our economies around the world is to essentially push out the virus by vaccinating a massive number of people in our populations.
Rory, what's exciting you in 2021?
From a sustainability perspective, some of the carbon capture technology that's coming forward on the blue hydrogen or the green hydrogen piece, which can potentially change the way that we excrete carbon and how we measure it. So I think that could be a very exciting space as we move forward, as long as people keep putting money into it. The other thing that also excites me as well is businesses seem to be still very committed to sustainability and their sustainability goals, even though companies have very little capital expenditure post-COVID. That's something we're definitely noticing, but that's where we can help hopefully finance some of those activities to move things forward.
And absolutely no pressure, but final word to you, Rhea.
Thank you. So I think what's exciting me is the growing awareness, right, in my space about single-use plastic and how detrimental that actually is. And how we need, we're seeing more and more people commit to sustainability, move from sort of more like rampant consumerism to more conscious consumerism, and we're seeing this globally. So that's what's exciting me, is the fact that people are we're seeing more people saying no to plastic and look for healthier, better alternatives.
Guys, thank you very much. I could sit here and talk to you guys because I feel like I'm going to university and just learning and listening from you for the last hour. Thank you so much for all your contributions. I'd like to thank Rory, Karl and Rhea for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank the audience as well. Thank you for tuning into this Restart webinar and podcast brought to you by Arabian Business and the Prestige Group. Thank you, everybody, and let's hope we have a very good 2021.
Thank you.